One of the best ways to be less frustrated with CSS is to have some structure to how you're writing it. Maybe you're already using something like BEM, SMAX, object-oriented CSS, or many other different naming conventions that exist out there, but you're looking for something new. Or maybe you just wing it and just write and make things happen, and you're looking to get a little bit more organized. Whatever the case is, I've been asked a lot about CUBE CSS, so in today's video, we're going to be exploring what it's all about. Hello, my friend and friends. I'm so glad that you've come to join me once again. And if you're new here, my name is Kevin, and here at my channel, I help you fall madly, deeply in love with CSS. And if I can't get you to fall in love with it, I'm hoping to at least help you be a little bit less frustrated by it. And one of the best ways to be less frustrated with it is to write more maintainable CSS. So we're going to explore the CUBE CSS naming convention. We're going to see what it's all about, and we're going to be doing it by building out this project from Frontend Mentor. It's not this big, huge page, but there's enough to it that it's going to allow us to dive in and explore all the different sort of concepts and ideas that are part of CUBE. And from there, you can take them and expand them off into larger scale projects, but we'll be able to do it in a smaller amount of time. So let's go and dive in and take a look at it. All right, so first off, here's the cube.fyi linked in the description just down below. And this is the documentation for CUBE that I would strongly recommend you check out if you do get more interested in it. We won't spend too much time in here, but we'll sort of poke our noses in every now and then just to get a few different ideas about what it's all about. But just to start off with, first of all, what it stands for, because we have this acronym here. So it is Composition Utility Block Exception. And CSS is a big part of it too. So it is not just CUBE, it is CUBE CSS. And so this is very different from BEM, which starts at the block level, and then you go to the element inside and then the modifier from there. If you're not even familiar with BEM and you're curious about that, I'll put a link to a video where I explore how that works in the description as well. But what BEM does is it looks at composition first, then utility classes, then it gets to the block. And for me, this is that talking about how I was thinking about things a little bit differently. This really spoke to me. And so I'll talk about why I really like this as we go through and build out our little project that we're going to be doing. But let's go and take a look at the project we're going to be doing, because I have put a little bit of something together, which is basically I've linked to the Google font we're going to be using and my own style sheet over here. And if we go and look at my CSS itself, I've done two things. One of them is I just took all the colors from the design that we're going to be doing and font sizes and font weights, and I put them all as custom properties here. If you're not familiar with custom properties, I'll put a link down in the description, and there might be a card popping up that goes into the basics of custom properties, but you should be able to follow along pretty well, even if you've never used them before. And I have a reset that is here, and we are using Andy Bell's CUBE CSS. So it seemed like a pretty good idea to use Andy's modern CSS reset that's right here. And so I'll link this in the description as well. So if you want to give it a quick read to go a little bit deeper into his explanation of it all, you can check that out. But that's what we have right here, and I've already pasted it in. But other than that, we don't have anything, and we're starting basically from scratch. And I wanted to do it without any HTML written, because it's going to sort of let us explore the thinking about things a little bit as we go through this. So let me open up Figma where I have the design opened, and we'll zoom in on it a little bit. And let's get started. So basically I have a card here in the middle. So we'll do .card, and I think that's an appropriate name for this. And then in the card, we have this image that's at the top, and then we have this next section down at the bottom. So I'm going to do something that's very BEM-y, and I'm going to do card image. And I'm actually going to move that class to the beginning here, just because I like having, it's going to make it easier to see the structure once we have our alt text on there. And so here I have it in my images, and it would be my illustration hero.svg. Perfect. And so that's my image, which is my card image, and the double underscore is very BEM. And if this is obviously with BEM, the double underscore is a very big part of how BEM worked. Here you just do what you want, basically. So I could do card image. There's no strict things on that. I could even just have this as an image like that. But I'm going to go with the double underscore because it's what I'm comfortable with, because I have that strong BEM background, or strong, I don't know. I'm familiar with BEM, and I used it for so long that it sort of stuck with me. And it is mentioned even in the CUBE documentation. So the next will be my .card content. And the reason I'm doing this as a separate div is because if we look here, there's padding all the way around, right? We have space on the top, the left, the right, and the bottom. And I just realized something's missing from the design. Ah, there it is. I must have deleted it somehow along the way. I was like, there's too much space on the bottom. There we go. So the card content, yeah, we have this equal spacing all the way around. So I can put all of that in there. This will get my padding on it. Talk more about that later. We do want to do composition utility block. I am only putting the blocks here, but when we get to writing the CSS, we're going to pop back into the HTML and we'll sort of, we're going to go back and forth and explore things a little bit to really understand the idea of Cube. So I have my card content, and then in here, what do we have? We have my H2, which is my title, and I think we can just do an H2. Maybe it would be an H3. I don't know. We don't have a larger design system, but I don't think it would be an H1 because this looks like it would live somewhere else on a page. So we have that. Then we just have a paragraph. I'll come and bring the content in a little bit. So we have that. We have my paragraph. Then here we have, this obviously needs to be a div because we have a different background color on it, border radius on here, but we also have 3 columns basically. So let's do a div. And this is where if you're using BEM, the naming could get kind of weird because I think it's a mistake that people would often make if they're using BEM, where something like this would become like a class equals, and you're going, well, it's in my card, so I guess it's my card plan. And then in the card plan, then you get like different things that you'd have to be applying to the different things in here. But to me, even if I was using BEM, this looks like a standalone component a little bit that I could use somewhere else. This doesn't necessarily have to live in a card. It could be this piece that could plug and play into other places. So even with BEM, I would call this my plan. And then I would probably have my plan icon, my plan details, and my plan button or whatever. But in this case, we're just gonna, let's leave a blank div here for now, class, and we'll come back to it, as I said. And in here, we can throw my image. And this image is going to end up, I'm going to put it in a div just to be safe because I'm going to use display flex to make the columns. And I know that images that are flex items, there's some bugs with them. So, or some strange things can happen anyway. So I'm going to do it like this. And so that's my image here. On this image, it'll be in my images. And that's my icon. And in this case, on the other illustration, I did give it some alt text. On this one, I'm going to leave it blank because this is really a decorative icon. This icon doesn't add anything. It just is there. It doesn't tell me it's an annual plan. It doesn't even tell me it's a plan. It doesn't tell me anything. It's just this decoration. So decorative elements, don't delete it. You should still have alt text, but it should be blank. And that when you leave your alt text blank, it says this is a decorational image to screen readers and the like. So that's my first column. Then we can have here a div, which will be this content here. So that could be p times 2. And then, just so I don't get mixed up, I'm going to bring that in now. And if you're in the inspect mode in Figma, you can come and just hit copy. Now to get the Figma file, you do have to have a membership with Frontend Mentor, but I think they have all the content. You get all the content normally. But normally you get all the content anyway. So it's, you can just copy and paste from their file. That's the first one, that's the second one. And then here I'm going to we'll just do a button. And I'm doing this as a button, even though it looks like a link, because it looks like something when I click change, it's probably going to open a new modal. And in that new modal, I get a choice of new plans or something like that, right? Or even a drop down that comes, or this is an interactive element, I would assume, and not something that brings me to another page. So to me, that makes more sense here as a button, just like these two down here make more sense. So that's this div here, which is that. So then after that, we need button times 2. And we get my 2 buttons that will come in. And let me just quickly come through and put all the text in. And basically, we have the structure here. We have a little bit of classes, but as I said, we'll come back as we go through and explore Cube in a little bit more detail. So let's come up to my styles here. And as I said, we have the custom properties. And just really quickly, I'll run down on how I use my custom properties. Because I name them, the 400 is always my base value. So my neutral 400 will be sort of like my base neutral color. Primary is my base neutral, which are primary, which in this case is the bright purple here. Because I figure from there it would get darker if I had more values. my base font size, and my base font weight. And with the font weights, because the 400 is usually 400, it always seems a little bit weird, but this is one of the reasons I do it, because sometimes you have a font weight, your base font weight is either a 300 or a 500. I don't want to have to remember that. Every project, I use my variable font weight 400. I know it's whatever I set my base to, and I don't have to think. So that's why I like these. As I said, then I'm just bringing in Andy Bell's reset through all of this, and there's not too much in that reset. It just sets sort of like a decent stage. So let's go and see what this looks like. So let's just shrink this down like that. And I do have live server running right now, so I have it opened right here, and we can check it out and see what we're up to. And a big part of CUBE CSS is the CSS component, which is let's take advantage of inheritance and the cascade and the way things work. So to me, that means we should start on the body and begin there, because that's where we can set a lot of the stage on how things look. And so we'll do a font family. In this case, it's red hat, red hat, and we can just do sans serif. That looks good. We can do my font size, var font size 400. Font weight is var font weight 400. I am using just vanilla CSS here, but as it says in the docs, this also works really well with preprocessors like Sass and pretty much any way you want to author your CSS. So it's not limited to this. You don't have to use custom properties with it. This is just how I like to author my CSS. And there's no real opinions on that side of things. It's just so you know. So we have my font size, my font weight. The color is much lighter, and I'm basing the color on this piece here because we see it in a few different ones. That looks like it's like the paragraph one, so I basically base my font, my color on that. So I think that's my var color neutral 400. As I said, it's my base one. There we go. That looks okay. There is a background on here, so we might as well bring that in. Background of var color primary. It's either the 3 or 2. 2 looks good. So yeah, that's off to a good start there on my body. I would then come in and style my H1. I don't really have an H1, so we'll skip that on this one, but we'll do an H2. We can say my font size. It's my var font size 700, I called it. And then we have my color is going to be my var color neutral 800, and I used 800 instead of 900 for this, just because I assumed that it's a really dark blue, but maybe there'd be one step darker. Normally 900 is my darkest color. Oh, I didn't change the line height. The line height here looks really spaced out, so let's come here. We can also add that line height, and let's go see what it actually is. So I can select in Figma if you're in there, you can select it, and here I can see it's a 16/26. I think that would come out to about 1.6. And if you want to actually do the math on it, it's 26 divided by 16 would give you your line height. But we'll do that. Now it'd probably be smaller on my H1, my H2, like the larger font sizes. So we could set that up, H2, H3. Let's just say line height of 1.1, because larger font sizes always have tighter line heights. If not, it just looks super spaced out. And that looks pretty good. Cool. So I'm pretty happy with where that's at right now. And that's sort of like that first level CSS thing. Do as much as you can just on your regular CSS. Your element selectors, just set the stage, make something as a good starting point to build off of. We've done that. We can now hit that next step. And there's 2 next stages. There is the composition, and there is utility. Now the idea with composition, and this is one of the reasons I really liked CUBE CSS, is I was getting to that point in my thinking that I liked separating concerns when it came to what was controlling my layout and what was controlling the other styling of things. That I wasn't always doing when I was doing it more of the BEM way. I wanted to think of like, okay, this is what's the layout here going to look like? Then there's the utility classes, and the utility classes are, like they say, it's very utility based, and you could use tools that could generate utility classes for you, or you could just write your own. We're going to write our own because there shouldn't be too many to do. I might do that really fast because it could be boring to watch. But just as an example, I could come in here and you can see the spacing on the 2 sides is 48. And I'm just in the inspect mode in Figma, which is how I'm getting that. And if I come here, I'm guessing it's 48 on the bottom. So we have 48 spacing all the way around. So I can have a padding. And then it depends on how you like to work. You know, some naming conventions will do, or you might even have like a P1, P2, P3, P1, P2, P3 for padding. I like actually just writing it out. And I'm going to do a padding 48 so I can easily remember that's the one I want. And just do padding is, and 48 I believe is 3 rem. So 3 times 16 should be 48. And so we can have that. Now there might be other spacing, like if I look between this and this, it's 32. We have a 20, 17. We'll go with 20. What's what here to here is 32. What's this one? 32. I might just do a general 32 on all of them just to make the spacing a bit more consistent. Or actually we're on, and then here we have 25 on the top, bottom, 24 left, right. I know in Figma it can be really hard to actually get the spacing to be the same. You get this, like well, actually on this, maybe there's an auto layout, but sometimes you're trying to drag and it keeps skipping a value. I'm just going to say it's 24 for all of them. So we could have my padding 24 is my padding 1.5 rem, and that should be there. Then this one we do have a little bit too, but on buttons I tend to use rems anyway, so I'll probably just, or ems I should say, so I'll probably link that height more to an M, or the padding top bottom on that one. Another way you could actually do something like this too, just so you know, is you could actually come here and have a whole bunch of space values. So space 1 is 1 rem, space 2 is 1.5 or 1.25 rem, space 3 is 1.5 rem or whatever. And then you could bring those values back down into these as well, just as another way of working and building off of more utility classes, which works really well sometimes. I'm just trying to think on how I want to do the styling here, but we at least have those two. So let's so that's my utility for like padding. We're gonna have some margin ones and stuff here too, but I'm gonna come in and do my colors. We'll do text dark as one, or we can even we'll do text 800, just so it links back to the number of my custom property. So it goes back to my there, so we can say color is my var color 800, neutral 800. So here we should probably put neutral too, actually, neutral 800. And if you haven't worked with utility classes and you're seeing me build this out, you're going, Kevin, that's a lot of work. But this one will be my 400, and we'll do, and even this could even be like a text. You know what, we're going to do that. We're just going to do a color dark. I'm basing it what I see here, and we'll do this as a text subdued. It's the base font size. What's this color? 55, is that the same? Oh, that's the same one, okay. So, but yeah, it comes down to like, how do you want to name things? How do you want to build things out and everything? And building out a whole set of utility classes, it can take a little bit of time. There are even tools that you can build a design system in Figma and have that become a JSON file, which then you can then build into, like, have that generate utility classes in CSS. So which takes even more time to set up, but then once it's there, obviously things can work really quickly. But setting up utility classes, if you haven't used them before, is often worth the effort. And yeah, and then you just have to decide how far do you want to go. And if you want to go super far, you just go with Tailwind. It generates utility classes for you as well. Right? So if you want to go all out, then you go all out. This is sort of a bit of a middle ground that we're going to be following. But we're going to do that. Then we can have my BG. What I don't like, even the dark, like here, I don't like the dark so much, because what if you had a light mode and dark mode? The dark doesn't mean too much, but for now, we'll just stick with these. And we'll do color of var color neutral 100, which is white. We need this one here as well. So we can do, this is where the numbering, see, I was switching it around here, but I'm just going to do my neutral 100. BG, and maybe this is just because I always work this way, 200. I'm so used to working in a certain way that my mind just keeps going back to that. So we'll stick here, text neutral 800 and neutral 400. And that just made me realize I didn't switch that one. Even this could be like a text default or a text body default. I mean, you can come up with however you think works good for your system and your team. And there's so many different ways to work. But I'm going to go with this for now. Then we have the buttons. We're not going to get to that yet. I just want to do some of these basic ones here, so we can actually start seeing some of these come to life. So let's come on my card, and instead of styling stuff on the card like you would with BEM, I can come here and do, it's my BG neutral 100, and whoops, I did color on these two. We should have those as background color. Success. Now the problem is my card's taking up all the space on the page right now, so that's not looking great. So on there, actually over here, composition, utility, we're just going to come down and say block here. So this is going to be, whoops. So we can have my .card, and I'm just going to say for demo only. Maybe you need it, but I'll do a max width of 30 rem. Actually, it should match that image. So how big is that image actually? We can just look here. So there we go. And actually, just to get it right in the center of the screen, we'll do another for demo only. We'll do a display of grid, a min height 100 VH, and a place items center. And that will just put it right in the middle of the viewport. Makes it easy. The font weight actually looks a bit light, but I just checked it in the DevTools and it's saying it's 500, so I'll take their word for it. So that's there, and then on my card content, we can come in here and say it was the padding 48, because we know that's what we want there. And actually, for the whole thing, we do need a text-align center, and this is something like I could just do it on the card itself. Maybe that's what we want. But I do like having utility classes for that and to be able to adjust things. And now sometimes you do it on, and again, you want to take advantage of the cascade. So let's do the text alignment ones down here, and we'll do 2. Text, we can do 3. Align is text align start, text align, I'll do left, and we'll look at what start means here in a second. I think it's going to work. This will be my end, and this will be center. And end will be right. Pretty sure that those work. Let's find out right now. So on the card itself, again, take advantage of inheritance. We want this to work everywhere. I can do my text align right. It does work. Okay, cool. But we want to center for now, right? So we can center that, and everything is centered right there. We don't want that centering happening over here though, right? This you can see is actually left aligned. So over here, that was this guy, and we can do a few more things with our utility classes here. But we can do that was our BG neutral 200, which should give us back that color that's coming here. Then we also want to have we'll eventually add the flex on there. We need border radius on a couple of these as well. Oh yeah, and then we want our text align left. Now start and end, and I'm putting left in right here, they're not quite the same, because if you use start or end, it's actually referring to the writing mode. So if you switched maybe this would make more sense to actually have as end start and end as well. But if you switched from a left to right to a right to left language on the writing mode, the text align would go with it. Whereas if you use text align left, it's always text align left, and text align right is always text align right. It's part of the logical properties. If you want to know more about those, card popping up right now. Yeah. So there we go. That's looking okay. And then we have our buttons and stuff that need styling. Cool. There's also a spacing issue. And the spacing issue, there's a few different ways that we can approach it, but those would fall under composition because we're setting up a little bit of a layout here. So we're going to set up a few different composition classes. And the composition classes they're sort of utility classes in a way as well. But it's sort of nice to think about it differently, as this is a layout class, and then these are more like styling classes, if that makes sense. And so here on the composition, one of the ones that Andy uses is the flow. And I'm going to do it a bit differently than he does, but you might have seen me do this before, which is the lobotomized owl. And so where we have flow, what we could do is, I'm going to do it this way, and then I'll show you another approach you can use. We're going to do margin top of 1em. I'm going to change that in a second as well. But if I come over to here and all the way on my card content, we have the padding, and I can add flow, and look, we have some spacing that's been brought in. Cool, right? And basically what this is doing is it's selecting every second, or let's just put back border 1 pixel solid. on them. So you can see it's selected these guys here. There's a border on them. It's selected this, but it did not select my order summary. And that's because it's selecting every direct child of my flow except the first one, because this is if every sibling that has a sibling before it, basically is what this is saying. Some people don't like this because it's a little bit abstract, and if you're not familiar with it, you wouldn't understand what it is. So another approach that achieves the same thing is to do flow, and then you can do not last, or we could do not first child, which is exactly the same thing. If you prefer using margin bottom, so I'll do margin bottom, you could do not last child, and now it's selecting all of them except the very last child here. And eventually those will be on top of each other. We'll fix that as well because they're next to each other obviously at the moment. But yeah, this is a common one to have within the composition layout. Now, one issue actually with doing it this way is it does boost the specificity of the selector, because this has like it's almost two, or it's equivalent to 2 class selectors instead of 1. Whereas when you have the star plus star, it doesn't do that. So if I did want to modify the margin on one of these with, say, a utility class, it probably wouldn't win because this would get in the way. And so one way you can deal with that is to use the where selector. So it's where, not last child, and the where, anything that's wrapped inside the where has 0 specificity. So you can see it's still working. And if, once again, if you want to know more about where, there's a video popping up over there. But basically it lets you put multiple selectors into a selection that have 0 specificity on them. Now this is for flow, which I'm actually a fan of, and I actually like doing it not first child. And I'll explain why, but you see the space here is bigger than the space here, and that's because I did 1M. 1M is nice because then if you have larger font sizes, the space above them is bigger than the space below them, which is a good thing to have. But yeah, so that's why doing this as a margin top instead sort of makes more sense. And then on here we can do a var flow spacer, comma 1M. And that means that it just makes things a little bit easier to override. I'm not going to talk too much about that. This is a non-existing custom property that then you could customize things in different places. It's talked about more in the CUBE CSS documentation, so you can read about it there. So this could be a useful one for when you want to bring the spacing in. And actually, I didn't mention it, but that is partially because we are resetting it and removing the margin from most things. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm doing that. Now, another way we could sort of achieve a similar goal is, we'll stick with flow actually, and I'm going to do it this way just to show you an alternative, is if I do that and I save, there's no more spacing. Everything is stuck together because we have 0 margins on anything. And we can do a display of grid and then do a gap of 1M. And we get a very similar, but look at that, our buttons already stretch. So this is not really, we're not bringing back that natural flow spacing. So maybe flow is not the right name here. We could call it grid flow maybe, just to indicate that, like, because grid does change certain behaviors and it causes some things to stretch, which you don't always want to have. So we'll call it grid flow, just so we know that it's a little bit different, but it gets a, there we go. It's looking pretty good. But again, the variable spacing you can't have with gap. So the space here is going to be the same as the space here is here is here. One of the downsides of that, I guess. So we can come in now to, I'm just looking here at a few more things we need to do. So I have some text stuff going on here. So I'm also going to come in and create a font weight bold, which does my font weight of var font weight 700. And I just thought maybe this is actually the 900. I think it actually is. We should check. That's 900. This one is 900 as well. So we'll have a bold. We can have an extra bold. Extra bold. I will just call it black actually, font weight black, which would be my 900. But this is one of those things, like on my H2, I am setting this here. So I don't have to use the utility class everywhere. I just use them for things like this guy, the annual plan, where I do need to change the color and do all of that. So let's come back to this div right here. And this is my annual plan. So here I can do class equals text neutral 800, and I can do my font weight black, and I get the styling on it that I needed. And that one I don't need to do anything. So it's easy, instead of having to come up with these weird class names sometimes, just having a couple of utility classes that you can throw on something can be really nice. And my order summary got completely broken there when I changed that. Font size. Oh, whoops. I didn't do my font weight. That's why. Font weight. Font weight of var font weight 900. That looks better. And we'll just move that up. Perfect. Okay, so there we go. We're getting a little bit closer to what the layout actually looked like. Let's come in, we're going to keep working on this guy right here now. So on here, as I mentioned, we need to have a display flex on there. So that would be, that's this one here, where we have the text align left. We have my BG neutral. So I'm going to add 2 more classes here. I'm going to add a flex row. And I'm going to add, we're going to do a flex row, and things are getting a little messy now, actually. So let's bring in something else that Cube does. And I'm going to come here and actually see I have my grid flow here. So I have like this guy, then I have a padding, then I have a grid flow. What I'm actually going to do is bring grid flow onto this side. Card, BG neutral, those are okay. Okay, so this is another way that Andy is used to organize the CSS a little bit more, is and this is a little controversial, but he wraps things in groupings. And so here is the card class, which is a block class. And then these ones here are both utility classes, so they get wrapped like that. Now these are just invalid selectors. They don't do anything. And because they're invalid and CSS just works anyway, then it just keeps going and it ignores them and it still applies those other ones. Now here I only have a block. I don't need to wrap anything. Once again, here I can come and wrap these. So there's my card content, and then I have these two. Grid flow, actually, we're going to wrap these all separately. And this is something that I haven't personally adopted into my own CSS, but I do see the value in it, but I just haven't done it. And the reason I'm separating these two is because I do have them as 2 different things here. One is in my composition, one is in my utility. So I'm breaking them each up. So here we have my flex row, that's compositional, we can do that. And then we have these 2, which are my utility classes. And it's just a way to sort of visually break up and find things a little bit easier and faster and know that, okay, wait, here's my block, here's my utilities and all of that. So if you have a whole bunch of utilities, you don't get this weird mix where sometimes the utilities first, sometimes it's last. Like you sort of get a bit more of a structure to it, and you don't get like your 3 utilities, then another, your card block, and then 2 utilities, and then a compositional, and then something else. I don't know. But just to say, we can do it a little bit like this. And this one's actually going to have one more, which is going to be my, I'll just do BR for border radius, border radius 1. And then we're actually going to come up on the card itself here, and this one will get a BR2, just because it is a bigger border radius on the card. And we'll come and do those border radiuses in a second. We have the flex, and we should add some. We have another one to add on here, which is my padding, 48, is it 24? No, what was my padding? It was 24. Why is padding 24 not working? Padding 24 should be working. Oh, whoops. Make sure if you do put these separators, you put a space, because I had this, like, no space there. So hit save now, and now we get the padding that actually shows up there. Cool. So yeah, we have the flex row. So let's come and do that. So I'm going to do that under composition as well, because it controls layout. So we can do flex row is a display of flex. And with these, I also do a gap, and I'm going to do 1M. Actually, these I usually do, we can do rem on these. And one thing that's nice with both of these, and I'll do both of them at the same time, what I actually usually do is the similar one that we saw before, whereas I put a variable of gap, and we'll do 1 rem. And that means we'll explore, or even here, we could do it right away. So say on my dot card, I could actually say that my gap is 2 rem, and it's going to make the spacing here bigger, or 4 rem, and it makes it bigger. Because I'm using this class, but on the card, I'm specifying anything on the card or inside the card should actually have a different gap. And you can see it's actually influencing things here as well, because again, this is inherited and it flows in through the element. And yeah, look at that. We did that, and it's almost perfect, except we need the change on that side. We'll look at that in a second. Let's put in the border radiuses. So again, we can come into these utility classes, and we can come and say border radius 1 and a .br2, and I don't know what they are. Let's just say it's a border radius of 0.5 rem, and then this one can be border radius of 1 rem. I could check the file, but we'll speed things up a little bit. And if we look down at the bottom of this one, nothing has happened yet. So we can see that one's working. It actually looks pretty good, but did I not put it on the card itself? BR2, once again, I forgot my space. There we go. That looks pretty close to what we want. Now it's not going to work on the top. So for that, I'm actually going to come on the card and I am going to say overflow hidden. There we go. And that solves that. And I'm just doing this directly on my block now because this is something that I just want to do here and I don't really have anywhere else. I guess I could make a utility for that, but it's something I use so infrequently. To me, that sort of makes sense. Okay, I need some unique styling that's on this element. I'm going to throw it down here and just put it there. And so yeah, let's go and do my buttons now. And the interesting thing with buttons, this is going to let us explore the exceptions a little bit. So the first thing is we're going to do a class of button. And with my class of button, let's come and get there. And we'll come in and actually just put this class of button on all of them. Or no, we're not actually, but we'll put a class on all of them. This first one, because it looks like a link, I'm actually just going to write link. And then these two here, we're going to write button. Button. So we'll start with my actual button. Let's zoom in on it a little bit. This is, you do have to decide at this point, do you want like a default styling that then you overwrite, or do you want to do it more of I'm setting the stage and then you have to add some modifiers? I'm going to say most buttons are probably the primary, but we'll look at both ways of doing it. And so we can set our background color is my var color primary 400. We want a bit of padding, so I'm going to do padding top and bottom of 1em and left and right of 2. The 2 doesn't really matter right now, right? But we'd have to modify that a little. This could be a pointer is cursor, text decoration of none, just to make sure it behaves like a button should. Or actually, is this cursor pointer? I always mix them up. That is. I always get that backwards the first time. Text decoration none, assuming you might put this styling on a link. Text decoration, we can do our color is my var color primary or neutral 100 by the looks of it. I have my font weight, and this is where, you know, I guess this would actually fall more under a block, but font weight of var color font weight bold. These are not black, these are bold. Border 0. So you could have a button that's throwing all of these utilities on, but buttons are always going to have the same styling on it normally, right? Your buttons tend to always look exactly the same. So YA border radius can be 0.5 rem. So this is where, like, instead of using a whole bunch of utility classes to build this out, and every time you need a button, you have to string together that same grouping of utility classes, it's a lot easier just to have a class that does that. There is a hover that we want on this as well. So button hover dot button focus, and on those it's just the background color that's changing. I know there's a shadow. I won't do the shadows for now, just you get the idea, I think. The focus is my background color that's going to change, and it should just become the 300. The reason I know that is just here in the design file they have like the focus state there. My font weight didn't work. Font weight bold. Font weight var font weight bold. Did I do that? I did 700. I switched it. We started that way and then changed our mind. There we go. So the button's working. Now obviously we don't want both buttons looking the same. So maybe it would actually make a lot of sense to strip some of this styling off of it. So we could leave a lot of this actually on here. And the main thing that I want to take off is the background color, basically, right? We want to have no background color as the default. So here the background, we can just put transparent as a default. So we start off and there's nothing coming in. And then we want to have modifier classes. And this is a little bit like this groupings thing. This is another thing that Cube does that's very different. And instead of using a class for a modifier, it uses a data attribute. So we could come on here and say data type is equal to primary. And then here we could do a data type is equal to, we'll call it naked, I guess. And we'll hit save. And then we style it in our CSS with those. So here I would have my dot button data type is equal to primary. And I'll explain the thinking here in a second, but let's paste in that background color again. So you can see that one's come back to life. And here we're just going to copy this because we need button, both of these have the same thing on it. So it's only applying that to my primary button, and that one works that way. And then we have that naked one. So actually, let's just grab this, paste it, and then this becomes my naked button. And here there's not actually a background color, it's just the color itself is my var color neutral 400, I think. There we go. And you can see that color. And actually, I just realized I might not even need that to be on there because this color we could take from here and place it on that one. So this, we might not even need anything. It's getting the dark color. That's curious, but whatever. We know we can fix that. We need to hover on that one as well. So let's do that really fast. This is naked. And here the color changes. And what does the color change to? It just gets darker. So we can make that color the 800. And now we have that button and that button are both working. One thing I'm just realizing now actually with the design, this because of all the padding on there. So here I just put, we can do padding 0 because it looks like it shouldn't actually be taking up any space in the design because it's really close to the bottom. So it looks like it should have some extra space on the top, but just to sort of get through the basics of how this works. And the reason that Andy uses data type or a data attribute, you can come up with your own and apply your own. But the reason that he uses data attributes for exceptions rather than doing the BEM double hyphen, and when we say exception, I just mean like here's one type of button, here's a different type of button, is if you go with classes, you could technically do a button primary and then a button naked, and you could apply both classes, and it's just going to rely on the CSS to choose the right one. Whereas if you do it as a data type, you're putting one data type. And so then it just sort of limits things a little bit more. It gives you a hook that you can hook into easily with JS. So yeah, I think it makes sense. This is another one of those things I haven't personally adopted myself, but I do see the value in working that way. And so we'll come up and let's get this working. We have two things. I'm going to move these buttons actually just into these block area because I think it makes more sense there. And we're going to fix this one. So that one's my link. So that it falls into a bit of a funny zone, but we're definitely doing that as a utility class of having a link.link, just because this one could be one of those things that is an a comma dot link, and then it falls more from utility class to just your default styling at the beginning that I talked about. But I'll group these together here. But I think you could group this together in like your global CSS style thing as well. And so if something's a link, it means background is transparent, border is 0. And it looks like by default we have text decoration. We do have text decoration, so the color will be my var color primary 400. Oh, we want text decoration is off. Text decoration underline. Cool, the font weight is actually a bit bigger. Font weight will be my var font weight 400, 700. Yeah. Awesome. So that looks a little bit better. I guess we want to have a hover and focus on there. So here and here, hover, and then comma, paste, whoops, focus. And what we want to change is the color and the text decoration. So we don't need those. We'll keep that. The color and the text decoration are the things that change. So the color becomes the 300 and this becomes none. Right? If we go down and look, it goes lighter and no underline. So we get the lighter, no underline. And of course we need our pointer, cursor pointer. And so it looks like a regular link now. And as I said, I think it makes more sense as a button. So that's why I wanted to create this class. Now, obviously it's in the wrong spot and I want to move it over. And there's different ways we could do it. And we can, whatever, I'm doing it the simplest way. This will come into my general utility classes here, and I'm just going to say push right, which would be a margin left of auto, because that's the easiest way to push something around. So that's on my link. We can do a push right. There we go, done. The underline looks a little bit different from here, just because we have like the skip ink going on. We could play with that a little bit, but it's fine. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. There's some shadows and a few other things I think we could apply here. But that's sort of the basics of how things work with Cube. You want to have some things that are setting up you're going to have your composition things that aren't doing very much. And we went the wrong way. My composition ones are up higher. But my composition ones, they're just setting the stage. And I did very simple compositions here. We have our grid setting up composition this way with spacing things out. My flex is applying a display flex here. But you could also just do something that's creating rows. Well, my flex row does that. But you might have something that's doing something a little bit more complex. But the idea is I have a display flex. I could take this icon that's here. I could switch it out for more text and it would just work. Or I could plug something else in there and it should just work. Then I have my grid. I could plug and play different content. I could have a really long paragraph, really short paragraph. I'm not setting things so rigid, and I have things that are just controlling the composition. Then I come in with these utility classes, and you can see as I was applying those, they started becoming more and more useful as I was applying the same border radius again, or I'm applying the same colors in different places, and that worked really well. And then when you need little things that, I had my dot card that I barely used when I have an overflow hidden on it just to make sure that works. And maybe you'd need a couple, maybe you're putting your shadow on here, right? So box shadow could get applied here. Even though box shadows often work really well as utility classes as well. So it depends on how far you want to push that utility class level. You might have a custom property here and you're just setting it with a custom property. So it really depends on how you like to work. And you can sort of decide your own balance on those, but it really starts composition, then utility, then little things like this, and then these exceptions that you're going and adding those in as well, instead of doing them with data attributes instead of with extra classes. Now, if there was any of those videos that I mentioned as cards before that you missed that you do want to check out, I put them all in a playlist right here that you can check out. So you can go in that playlist and find the one you're looking for. I've also linked them all in the description down below. And with that, a very big thank you to Jan, Johnny, Stuart, and Tim for being my supporters of Awesome over on Patreon, and all my other patrons for their monthly support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.